Hey everyone, this is JM. I'm coming at you solo this go around. Just a little mini episode. I wanted to talk to you with my Of Metal and Magic publishing editor hat on for a little quick moment. Give you an update of what we've got going on in the publishing house and give you some few tips and some advice on submissions in the submission process. So if you haven't been paying attention, last month we released my Of Metal and Magic core novel, Call of the Guardian. It's about 100,000 words, good, solid fantasy novel. Lots of fire, combat, dragons, all sorts of good stuff. This month, on the 17th of March, Richie Billings' novel, Pariah's Lament, is dropping. As of this recording, we don't have a pre-release link yet, but the final kind of kinks are getting ironed out on that, and we should have a link by the time we post this, and we should be able to post a link. Otherwise, I'll update the YouTube description, the product description to have those links. So we've got, by the end of this month, we're going to have 2 of our core novels complete and published. They are available in ebook and paperback. Call of the Guardian is currently Kindle only, KDP only, so you can get a ebook or a paperback directly from Amazon, or you can read it on Kindle Unlimited. You can also sign up for our newsletter and get the chance to potentially win paperbacks whenever we do giveaways. We give away paperback copies of our books and other things every once in a while, so you can get a copy that way as well. Pariah's Lament, we are publishing through Ingram Spark, which has a wider distribution. It will definitely be available on Amazon. Richie Billing will also be doing author events and pushing his book, paperbacks of his book, at local bookstores in his area. He's in UK, and that should also be available on other platforms, but we'll give you the details on that later. We've also got 3 more core novels, basically, that are towards the end of their editing cycle. One is Scion of the Oracle by E.A. Robbins. This book is going through its final editing process right now. Then it's going to go into formatting, and we will be pushing that one also on Kindle Unlimited, Kindle exclusivity. So you'll have to get your ebooks and paperbacks off of Amazon. And then Chris Brock's book, The Mad Rain, is going through a last beta read. Then we'll go into final editing and formatting and publishing later towards the summer. And then Douglas W.T. Smith's core novel, To Wield the Stars, is currently going through initial edits and beta reads, and it's going to go through the follow-up rounds of editing and should be released maybe towards the end of the summer, if I had to estimate at this point. In addition to that, we've started to receive a whole bunch of submissions. So I think some of these submissions have come from listeners of the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. Others have come from people who have subscribed to our blog or who have been visiting our website. But I've got several non-core, non-OMAM core, independent novel manuscripts on my read pile currently, as well as several short stories that we intend to publish on our website. Later this week, I'll be pushing a post with 3 new short stories, flash fiction pieces that are available to read on our website. And I have several more in my read pile or my editing pile. So we're really starting to pick up content here at this point. It's really, it's fun. It's amazing. It's exciting. It's also a lot of work for me, being the editor-in-chief, the primary editor as well. So a lot of things happening. What I wanted to do today is, because we've started to receive a lot of submissions, I wanted to just give you some advice on the general submissions process. And a lot of this is going to be relevant not only if you're submitting something to me at OMAM, of Metal and Magic, but also if you're submitting a short story to Asimov's Science Fiction, or submitting a story or a poem to a fancy literary journal, or submitting a novel manuscript to an agent, or another indie publisher. The submissions process, the professional writing submissions process, is a pretty standardized process. And most editors and most publishers and most agents kind of have the same expectations and goals, what they want to see, what they don't want to see, things that are going to hinder you, things that are going to help you. So I'm just going to take a few minutes today to go through some stuff about fiction submissions. You can also find this on the Of Metal and Magic website. It's a blog post I recently sent out called Letter from the Editor, where I go through submissions, what I'm looking for, and what other publishers are looking for. I'm going to break this down into three primary areas. The first is the cover letter, or the initial communication, whatever form that takes, your initial contact with the publisher, the agent, or the editor. And I'm going to talk about summaries and synopses of your story. And then lastly, manuscript formatting. And I'm going to keep this really quick. This is a mini episode, so I'm going to try not to bust the minute cap. So cover letters, initial communications. When you're reaching out to an editor or publisher or an agent for the first time, you want to make sure that initial communication, probably an email, is very professional and is also very short. If you're submitting a short story to a magazine, so let's say you have a short story and you're submitting it to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, your cover letter should pretty much only have the title of your story, your real name and your pen name, if necessary, the word count of the story, and the publication of the story. The publication record, has it been printed somewhere else? Is it a reprint? There's a lot of journals and magazines that won't take reprints. Give the editor a thank you, and that's about it. Unless you've been published in a professional venue, so that's currently 8 cents a word or more, then providing publishing credits really doesn't help you much. They're not necessary. Ideally, they are not part of the consideration for a short story venue. Ideally, the editor or the staff is blind reading your submission and comparing it to others based on merit. But if you do have a pro publication, that might weigh in your favor. Now, I differ a little bit currently at Of Metal and Magic, just because I'm not currently overwhelmed. So the editor at Asimov's Science Fiction gets hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions every month. They need it short. They can't afford to dive in. I'm not flooded at this point, and I'm a very kind of personal type of person. As an editor, I like interacting with the authors. I'm very involved. So I want to know who you are. If you send us a query, so if you go to our website of Metal and Magic publishing.wordpress.com and go to our Write With Us page, you can send an initial pitch essentially to us and say, hey, I want to do this with you. Either I want to be a beta reader for you, or I'm an editor and I think I can provide you editing services, or I have a short story for your consideration. So that Write With Us page, that contact page, that initial contact, is just you laying out what your intentions are. And I would like to know, in that initial communication, first, what are you offering us, or what do you want to do? And then who you are as a person. Are you a writer? Are you an editor? what's your experience? What are your interests as far as fantasy fiction go? Um, have you been published before? Do you have a website? Those sorts of things. And then if you're offering a story or you're pitching a novel, some details on that. But I'd like to have some info about who you are as a person, because I part of you know my shtick as an editor is I'm very involved. There's going to be a lot of community. If I pick up your story, pick up your novel, there's going to be a lot of interaction between us. So I want to know that I'm going to be comfortable working with you, and I'm going to like working with you. Those sorts of things. So moving on to, if you're submitting a short story or a novel pitch to us, providing a summary or a synopsis. So for a novel, if you're sending a query letter to an agent about your novel, and or if you're sending a pitch to me, the thing about your summary, your book summary, is it needs to be short. It probably shouldn't be more than like 300 words. This is not in the initial communication, you're not providing a full synopsis. You're not going through the entire plot of the book from start to finish. You're just hitting the key points. And typically today, the key point, the focal point of a book is the lead character. This is especially pertinent to fantasy. Fantasy is very character driven, very character centric. So any fantasy book agent, or myself included, first thing we want to know is who's your lead character. What's their deal? What's their background? What is the issue they are facing in this book, and how are they going to go about dealing with it? Plot is less relevant, though. If showing that you have created an interesting world for the fantasy genre is helpful. But basically, we want to keep it very concise. Who's your lead character? What is the problem that they are facing? How do they deal with it throughout the book? A lot of this would be similar to what you'd have in a book description in the back cover of a book. You don't provide unless the publisher or the agent, in their submission guidelines asks for a synopsis, you don't provide a synopsis. You wait to be asked for a synopsis. Give us the pitch, give us the basic idea of what your story is, and then if I like it, I will ask you for a full synopsis. And when you get into the full synopsis, now you're talking about a two-page document that goes through all of the critical plot points, discusses the themes, the character arcs, that sort of thing. I'm not big on synopses. If you send me a pitch with a summary, if I like it and if I feel like it might fit our very limited focus as a publisher, which is currently traditional classic fantasy, which I would define as past setting, second world setting. So it's not Earth and it's not steampunk or modern or anything like that. It's a past setting. It's a second world setting. That's what I would call traditional fantasy. That's our focus. If you got a story that seems to fit that traditional fantasy focus and an interesting pitch, I'm going to ask you for initial read, probably 30 pages. If I like the initial read, if it's well written, if it flows right, if it's catchy, I'll probably go straight into asking you for a full read. I'm less concerned with the overall plot and the arcs, because as a very involved editor, I can fix those things with you later on down the line. I'm more concerned that the writing is good and that you've got a foundation. But most publishers and most agents are looking for a finalized product. So they're looking for something that's tightly edited. They're looking for something that's very well constructed, and they're going to ask you for a synopsis so they can judge your plot and your architecture. Last thing, the manuscript. If I do ask you to send me a manuscript, whether that be a short story or a novel, initial excerpt of a novel, if you don't know, in professional publishing, there is a standard manuscript format. It's often called the shun format. You can look it up online. I'll provide a link with this podcast. I don't provide specific guidelines in our Write With Us page at the OMAM website because I'm not too concerned with that part of things with the initial communication. I more want you to reach out and tell me what you have going on and what your ideas are. But any other publisher, any other agent, any magazine or journal or e-zine that you're setting to, where you're sending a manuscript with your first initial contact, they do care about formatting, and how you format your manuscript tells a lot about you and your experience. If you don't use standard manuscript formatting, you look like a novice, to put it bluntly. The only exception is if that magazine, e-zine, or journal has specific writing guidelines, then you follow those, obviously. But if there are no specific guidelines, your default should always be shun standard formatting. I don't think it's particularly counterintuitive, but there are some aspects of standard formatting that some people don't think are relevant now, and I'm going to go through them. So shun formatting. First thing you do is you on your cover, on your first page, if it's a short story, then you don't have a title page, but you have contact information in the top left corner of the first page, word count in the top right corner. If it's a novel, then you generally have a title page with all that information in it. For the body of your manuscript, use a 12-point basic font. I prefer Times New Roman. I hate Courier. Don't send me Courier. It just looks dated and yeah, makes me want to gag. Double space the manuscript. There's a lot. There are some editors out there that will say, "Oh, it's modern age. It's digital age. You don't need double space." Unless you're told specifically not to double space your manuscript. It is easier for an editor to read, even on a digital screen. It's easier to read a double-spaced manuscript and to see the individual words and to make everything out. But additionally, like people like me, I print stuff out and I mark it up by hand. So if you're sending me a file, double space it. Because you're double spacing, you don't add extra spaces between the paragraphs because there's already a space there. What you do is you indent. But you don't indent using the tab key in your button. The tab key on your keyboard is your mortal enemy. Rip it off of your keyboard. Never use the tab button. What you need to do is use the ruler of your word processor and then indent by a 1/2 inch. Set the automatic indents of the first line of a paragraph to a 1/2 inch using your ruler. The last important thing is to have a running page count, and you do this in the header. And you can include your name or your pen name, the title of the work, and the page number in the upper right corner. Now, if you Google shun manuscript format, you'll find examples of all this. It's a SHUNN, shun, or standard manuscript format. But that's the basics. If you send me a manuscript that is formatted in standard manuscript format, the impression I'm going to get is that you have experience, that you've worked with publishers before, you've done submissions, you've been around the block. If you send me something that is in a 16-point wild font with weird margins because you think it looks nice, or you think it looks like a book, that's going to affect my impression of you as a professional writer. There is no formatting at this stage. When you send a submission to a publisher or an agent or an editor, we are going to do the formatting. There is no formatting at this stage. All I'm looking at is your text, and I'm editing your text. Is the writing good? Is the story good? If I accept your book, we will edit it, and I will format your book the way I want it formatted. So don't worry about professional formatting of your manuscript. That's not what we're doing at this stage. Use standard submission format. That covers most of it regarding submissions. And the last thing is, if you are looking to get into writing professionally, you need to have a social media presence, whether that be a website, a Facebook page, an Instagram page, something for your author identity. It's mandatory. It doesn't matter if you get picked up by the #1 agent in the country and you publish with the top 5 publishers. They are still going to require you to do social media, to have a website, to push all that stuff up. There's no more hiding in a cabin and just sending somebody your manuscripts and then forgetting about it. That's not the industry anymore. You have to have a social media presence. So if you don't have one now, you should make one. And if you send me a submission or send anybody else a submission, you're going to want to link that. Provide a URL in your initial communications of what your social media presence is. For an indie publisher like of Metal and Magic or other indie publishers, that's an important factor for us. It's sad to say, but we need to know that you can help sell books. Everybody, it's a team effort. We're all in it together. So that's about it. That's what we've got going on here at Of Metal and Magic, and those are some tips for if you want to submit to us. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can do that initial contact with me. If you've got a short story or a fantasy novel, just remember our focus right now is traditional fantasy stories, and anything not within that scope, I'm going to almost certainly reject, unless it's like the most amazing manuscript I've ever read. But yeah, I can't wait to hear from you. And until next time,